Hello, welcome to The Wandering Drew. I am Drew. Thank you for joining me. Well, spring is here, or on its way, and with so many people dealing with COVID and putting off hikes for the past year and everything we've been dealing with, I think there's a lot of people out there that are planning hikes that they've postponed, or just planning hikes in general. And I think there's also maybe a lot of new hikers that are planning their trips. So I thought this would be a great time to bring up the topic of a couple of tips for newer hikers. I don't want to say common mistakes or errors that hikers make. It sounds so negative. So we'll just make it a couple of tips or suggestions for new hikers to be aware of. But I think they also hold true for any hiker. I hope you'll join me. Welcome back. Like you, I have made a lot of mistakes while gaining experience and learning doing activities out in the woods. I am by no means an expert, far from it. But I do have some experience, and I think I have some experience over other people, and there's a lot of people that have a lot more experience than me. So I'm just someone who's learning every day as I go along, trying to get better and better with what works for me. And that's very important, because we do want to get better and more experience, and we also have to do what works for us. One thing I do know is nobody knows everything, and nobody starts out knowing what to do all the time. We have to learn from experience, and we all start out not knowing really what to do, but pick things up. Some stuff is very intuitive, or more intuitive, I should say, than others, and comes a little naturally. Other stuff, not so much. So we all make mistakes at times, or decisions that could have been a little better. Nowadays, I think it's very, very common, just like in the past, for people to do research prior to doing an activity. It's easier than it's ever been with the internet and social media being so available. Whereas years ago, it would be you'd have to search out like articles or books. Now you can just turn on your laptop or your computer and search YouTube and watch some videos and learn from the experiences of other people. So we can learn from other people's mistakes and save ourselves some of the discomfort and sometimes pain of gaining experience. We can lessen that learning curve and hasten it up a little bit. So these are some of my tips, I would say, for new hikers, whether that's camping, backpacking, or hiking. But it's also sometimes a reminder for all hikers to do these things or to pay attention to them. And several of these actually start out prior to you even stepping foot on a trail. The first tip I have is to be familiar with your equipment. You should know how to use your equipment. If you're going to be carrying it and taking it out there, you need to know how to use it. This means all your equipment. Take time before you go out on the trail to try things out. Make sure they work. Make sure you know how they work. The biggest thing I see, and things that I've seen out there, are a tent. I've seen people unpacking a tent from a box that they bought in the store, and they're out camping with it. There's several reasons why you should be doing this before you go out. One, you want to have some familiarity with the equipment you're going to be using. If it takes you 20 minutes to set up your tent while you're at home or in your backyard or even in your living room, I've done all of those, it's not as big a deal as if it's 20 minutes out on a trail at nighttime or in a thunderstorm. Big difference. The time you spend getting used to your equipment and familiar with it at home or in a controlled environment will reap you benefits out on the trail. How do you know if all the equipment is there? You want to make sure you have everything that's supposed to be there. And also, there's no reason to take extra equipment you don't need, like directions or the box. That's extra weight you're carrying, and now you have to pack it back out. Be familiar with your sleeping bag, your sleeping pad, how to inflate it, maybe how to deflate it. I've seen people not know how to adjust their trekking poles, their pack. How do you set up and use your cooking stove? Water filters. How about a headlamp? Do you know how to turn it on? Do you know how to turn it off? Do you actually have batteries inside of it? Are you sure it works? As I've said, I've seen numerous people, scouts frequently, but other campers or hikers, all have issues with each one of the systems that I've mentioned before. Bringing out a headlamp with no batteries. You should have checked that before you went out on the trail. So it's very, very important for you to make sure that all these things are working and have all the parts, and you know how to use them before you go out on the trail. Boots, sneakers, shoes, trail shoes, whatever you're bringing out there, you should have worn them before you went out on the trail. They shouldn't be brand new. This is not the time to break them in, or even know if they're a good fit for you. If they don't feel good around your house, they're certainly not going to feel good out on a trail when dealing with rougher or terrain and you're having a backpack on your back. It's not going to get better, only worse. You should have tried them out before you went out on the trail. Another thing to be of importance or to note, if you're borrowing equipment, which is very common when you're starting out, you may not have the equipment you need, and it's also a way to try stuff out without buying it, or a way to lower your cost of going out, camping, hiking, or backpacking, is to borrow equipment from a friend or a family member. Well, ask that person to show you how to use it. If you get a tent from someone, not every tent is intuitive on exactly how to set it up. It may have something unique to it. You still want to know that you know how to use it and that you're putting the poles in the right place. What if the rain fly is not there? What if it's broken? What if it's missing tent stakes? All these things have happened to me, or I, unfortunately, have done to someone else. I have borrowed and loaned equipment to someone with parts missing from a tent. Sometimes it's not intentional, it just happens. Maybe you meant to put them in, you wanted to clean them, or you just didn't put them back where they belong. It happens. The last thing you want to do is start setting up your tent after a long day of hiking and realize that the poles are missing, or a pole that's in there is broken, or a rain fly is missing and bad weather is there. That's something you really don't want. Additionally, make sure the items fit you. So, believe it or not, there is a limit sometimes on trekking poles. If you're going to use them, they have to be adjusted to you. The big thing would be a backpack. Not all backpacks are one size fits all. There are differences. There are variations among hikers. We have different size bodies and torso lengths. So if you can, it's preferable to get that backpack fitted for you. Or if it's a backpack that is adjustable, and there are many that are, that you adjust it for you. Make sure it fits because it'll feel more comfortable and make your trip more enjoyable. Also, having a bad backpack or something that doesn't fit you can actually, besides just being uncomfortable, can actually injure you. So those are my suggestions when it comes to making sure you're familiar with your equipment. The next item is overpacking. And we're all guilty of this, I believe. I know I'm guilty of it. Overpacking in this tent usually means bringing too much stuff. Sometimes it's too little, but it's usually overpacking, which is too much. Too much food, too much water, and too much clothing, and then too much of anything else. The first thing is food. Food is a very personal item, so it's hard to tell you what you should bring or what type of food you should bring. I think you should bring what you like and what you think you're going to eat. Just because you're going out in the woods doesn't mean you're going to change your tastes and your habits that much. So if you're a person that never eats oatmeal and doesn't like it, just because you're out in the woods doesn't mean you should be eating oatmeal. But that being said, realize that if you're going on a weekend trip or you're just going out for an overnighter, you're not going to be eating that much food. You don't need to pack on a lot of extra food in your pack because you think all of a sudden you're going to be walking all day and you're going to be starving. It doesn't really happen that way. After several weeks out in the woods, yes. I would say bring enough food for every meal you think you need, and maybe if you really want to have that sense of security, because it said we pack our fears, if you're worried about being hungry, bring a little extra. Throw in an extra snack or two. This way, you have extra if you want it. You're not going to be carrying too much, because remember, all this adds weight to your backpack. You have to carry it with you. I have never gone on a backpacking trip and not come home with food, which means that I took food with me, carried extra weight the whole trip, just so that I could have, I guess, something to help me get in shape faster, or the sense of security that I had extra food. So I'm still learning to whittle down what I bring, and I'm getting closer and closer, but there's nothing wrong with erring on the side of having an extra meal or a snack or two. But you really don't want to bring extra meals that you don't need to. So, but it's personal again, so just keep that in mind when you're backpacking, that you're probably not going to be eating as much as you think you are. And I will touch on this a little later, but if you're going out there and it's your first trip, you really shouldn't be doing some long days and long mileage trips as a first timer anyway. But I'm going to touch on that again later, as I said. So realize you're not going to have the big appetite you think you're going to have. The next item discussing is clothing. Clothing is a big one and very frequently seen, especially among new hikers. This is not a vacation trip where you need multiple outfits for the same day, where you're going to be changing your clothes all the time. Maybe if you're with little kids and you're car camping, you might bring a lot of extra clothes, but if you're backpacking, hiking, or camping and walking out somewhere, you're generally not taking a lot of extra clothes, because extra clothes mean weight. Believe it or not, most hikers wear the same clothes every day for several days. That's how you reduce what you carry. So if you're going for a weekend trip, you don't need 3 pairs of pants or shorts, 3 shirts, 3 pairs, or maybe 4 pairs of underwear, just in case you have an accident. The only thing that I might change is socks. Socks, I would probably bring an extra pair. So even for a weekend trip, I would probably bring 2 pairs of socks. But other than that, I don't need all those extra clothes. If I was to bring an outfit change for every day, that's a lot of extra weight that I'm carrying and taking up a lot of space in my backpack that I don't want to give up. It's real estate that's very important, and the weight is what I don't want either. So realize, be very intentional with all the items you put into your pack, but it's very, very easy to overpack when it comes to clothing. Also, if I'm doing a summer trip, I know I don't need a big winter jacket. I might just need a sweatshirt or something with a hood or a fleece that will keep me warm if temperatures get a little chilly early in the morning. But I'm not expecting, hopefully, winter-like weather during a summer trip. You need to know what temperatures you're looking at or expecting so that you can plan your clothes accordingly. I'm going to touch upon that a little later. But frequently, just bring what you think you're going to need for the weather that's anticipated and no extra. If you're going to hike in shorts, have shorts. Maybe have a pair of pants, or you can have convertible pants and shorts if it gets a little windy or chilly. But learn to layer your clothes to make your clothes more efficient and to cover a wider variety of weather conditions. So if you have a base layer, as they say, so I have a t-shirt, I might have something like a sweatshirt or a jacket that I can put on that will warm me if it gets a little chilly. And if it's really windy or rainy and cold after that, I can always put on my rain gear or a windbreaker that would help protect me from that very chilly weather. So by using multiple layers, I make my clothes more efficient and more versatile without having to add a lot of weight. So learn to do that. Obviously, you can also underpack clothes and not bring enough for the right conditions. So maybe you don't bring a jacket because you wanted to save the weight, and now it's rainy weather out there and you didn't bring a rain jacket at all. That's probably very rare. Most people will tend to overpack, not underpack. Another item is water. Now, depending on the conditions, once again, of where you're going and the trail you're going to be on and what's available and what's not available, you have to decide how much water you're going to either carry, bring in with you, or how you're going to store it while you're out there. So if you're going on a nice trail and water is very plentiful at this time of year, then maybe you don't need to carry 4 water bottles with you. You can plan on resupplying while you're out on the trail. But if you're just starting out and maybe you don't have the right equipment or you're not aware of what to do, it's very possible that you could pack, 4 liters of water and figure that's enough to make it for the whole weekend. I would only do that if I'm at a place where water is not available. Other than that, I'm going to plan on getting water out in the field while I'm on the trail. Remember, all these things will change depending on what time of the year you're going on a trail. A trail is very different in each season. So your requirement of what you need in terms of clothing or even water may be different depending on what season you're going hiking. Know what the norm is for when you're going. If you're going to look at reviews or comments left by other people about the trail, make sure they're appropriate for when you're going. If it comes to water being available, then it's seasonal. So if you're going in July, when someone wrote that there was water in November, doesn't really help you a lot because it's not in the right context of when you're going. Other equipment. Remember, I said be critical and be intentional with all the equipment you bring. Do you really need an axe, a machete, and a bow saw so you can cut firewood? Most of the time you can find the firewood you need on the ground. You're not cutting down a tree to make firewood. It doesn't work. Okay, you just need to gather small wood that you can generally find on the ground in order to make a fire. Even a knife. I carry a very small pocket knife that usually does the job. You don't need a machete or a big survival knife to do these things. Most of the time, what most people need a knife for is to maybe cut food, maybe open a package of food, and maybe cut like a line or rope. That's it. So you can get away with a very small knife that's much smaller and lighter than what you think. The third tip I have is being underprepared. And this one's going to have a couple of subparts. But being underprepared, when it comes in this section, it's going to be physical. Most people tend to underestimate their weaknesses, or they overestimate their ability to hike and do the trail. Be realistic about what your abilities are. This is your first trip. You should be picking a trail that's really tailor-made for your ability and not overestimating what you think you're going to be able to do. Many of us watch other hikers and backpackers and campers on YouTube, and I think we get a unreal expectation of what we should be able to do by watching some people maybe that have been hiking for several months or training, and they're doing large mileage. So we begin to think that we also need to be able to do something similar. That if we can't hike 15 to 20 miles a day, that somehow there's something wrong with us or we're weak. And that's nothing could be further from the case. There's nothing wrong with going out there and hiking 5 miles or 8 miles. Okay, that's a very good first day or first trip while you're building experience and the physical ability to go longer. We all want to go on great trails. Maybe you go hiking with someone else, and I would suggest that you probably do when you're starting out. Hopefully someone that's more experienced than you, and I'll touch upon that in the future as well. But if you're going to go out there and someone wants to show you a great trip, but it's a really hard hike that's too challenging maybe for you at your ability, then that's not really a good fit for you. Nothing says that you can't put that on your wish list or do that in the future. It just means maybe you're not up to that skill level today. That is something for you to strive for, to maybe, if you go hiking, you enjoy yourself, to go do in the future. That doesn't mean you can never go to that trail. It just means maybe not go there today. So to summarize, most people will probably start out too much trail, meaning elevation or difficulty, too soon, and go too many miles to begin with. So pick something that's reasonable for you to do and is within your abilities, right? Runners don't usually start out doing a marathon. They may start doing 1 mile, work their way up to a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon. Hiking should be no different. We have to learn to crawl, then walk, and then run as we build our experience. The next subsection of being underprepared is underprepared in your research. So if you're doing a trip, you should be doing research or planning to know about the trail and what you're going to do. I've mentioned several things already in this video that should be questions that you're able to answer. And if you're not, it means you haven't done your job. So knowing, let's say, what type of weather you're going to expect or what should be predicted for that season, what kind of resources are available on that trail, what are the water conditions, in other words, what are the trail conditions even? If it's a rainy season or it's very muddy, are you aware of that? I know you're prepared for it. Maybe going a different time is a better fit for you and your ability. So you need to know, how much water do I need to bring, or how can I plan on carrying? Am I going to be able to get more water while I'm out there? How is this trail in terms of navigation? Is it easy to follow? Is it difficult to get lost on the trail, or it's fairly easy to get lost? Is it well marked? How is it marked? Are there just signs, or are there blazes or markings on the trees that I could follow along this trail so that I don't get lost? Where can I stay while I'm out of this trail? What campgrounds are available? Are there shelters there, or do I need to bring a tent? How far apart are these campgrounds? What is my plan on what I'm going to do the first day or the second day? How far are we planning on going? And what resources will be available when we get there? I've already mentioned clothing, the weather, water, all these things you should be aware of what's norm for that trail when you're going. And if you can't answer those questions, then you need to go back and probably do a little more planning. So that's the other thing, being underprepared for the environment and the weather. So if you don't bring the right clothing, or you're not prepared with rain gear when it's supposed to rain, you should be checking the weather several days out, looking to see what's norm for this area, but then checking it before you go so you can plan and pack properly. Then maybe a day or two before you go, or the night before you go, checking the weather again to make sure that you don't need to update or change or amend any of your clothing you brought because the weather has changed enough. Weathermen are pretty good, but they do get it wrong sometimes. Storm fronts or cold fronts or even bad weather moves in sometimes faster than expected or takes longer. Sometimes they say it's not going to rain and it does. It's not 100% guarantee that they're going to get it right. They're pretty good, but every once in a while things happen that you weren't expecting. Also, how long is it going to take you to hike what you're planning on doing? Are you underestimating or overestimating your ability to navigate this trail? If you've never gone hiking before, or these people have never gone hiking before, you may not have an idea of how long it's going to take you to go. Be conservative in your planning. Even if you're going on a day hike, you need to have some planning involved. You should always be taking some equipment. For instance, you should always have a headlamp or a flashlight, even if it's going to be a day hike and you're planning on getting back before it gets dark. What if something happens and you're delayed? What if someone hurts themselves and you can't get back to your car before dark? You should always have a snack, maybe a bottle of water, even if it's just a short day hike. It doesn't hurt to throw a candy bar or some sort of snack in your backpack and take it with you. But if something does happen, you'll be glad you have it. I already mentioned navigation, so you should know how the trail's marked and how you're going to follow it. Do you have a map? You should always have a map, a paper map preferably. You may have stuff on your phone, but what if your phone gets damaged, lost, broken, or runs out of power? How are you going to navigate then? Have a plan B. There's nothing wrong with being prepared to have a plan B. It doesn't mean you have to take a topographical map with you. It may just be a printout from a web page, just some rough idea of maybe landmarks, maybe if there's intersections, which way you need to go. It could be any of those things. It could be something textual, not even a real map, but something that gives you some direction so you know where you are and you can find your way if you can't open up your map. The worst time I've ever had, it was one time I went camping. I had an electronic kind of all trails map of a trail I was on, and I went on the top of a mountain and it was chilly and it was foggy. It was so cold that the phone would not register my finger to unlock or open it. So I couldn't open up my phone to find out the map, the trail, or the GPS. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to find my way back to the trail and get back to where I needed to go. But I was also mentally prepared about what happens if I can't find my way and I need to stay up here tonight. So be prepared for those situations. A paper map would have been a great resource for me. As I said, I've made mistakes and I've learned from them. And that brings me to my next point, which is be flexible. In any of these things I've mentioned, whether it's we're going to hike 8 miles today, realize that that may not take place, and that's okay. You may only do 5 miles and everybody's really tired. What if someone hurts themselves, sprains an ankle? You need to be flexible. It's okay not to do the plan, but you make that decision at the time. Be flexible. Be willing to adjust your plan on the fly, so to say. What if you get to camp at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you decide you want to hike another hour? Even though you planned on stopping there, go the extra hour if that works for you. But make a decision to do that intentionally. The same thing may be you're just not going to do the miles today. You thought 8 miles would be reasonable and the terrain is just too tough or the weather's bad. We don't feel like it. We found a really nice spot 5 miles in with a great view, and we think we want to stop here, make a campfire and have dinner. That's okay. You're making the decision. So it's okay to be flexible. The next item is leaving equipment home. I've seen a lot of hikers, and I myself have left stuff home that I could have swore I packed, or I definitely planned and put in my pile of equipment to take with me, and I still left it home. And this comes from packing without using a checklist usually. I suggest you use a checklist because it alleviates the chance of you leaving an item out. If it goes in the pack, you check it off, you know it's in there. But Humans being what we are, we're always looking for a shortcut, and I'm no different. And I frequently leave items or I lose items. My last trip, obviously, I lost my tent stakes. I'm still not sure how they happen. I can guess, but things happen. But it's more common than you think. And I've gone camping with people leaving everything home from a tent, sleeping bag, sleeping pad, food. I've even had someone leave their boots home. Okay? Leave all these items or have left all these items sitting at home by the door as a silent reminder when you return that you messed up and you forgot to take me. So sometimes you can fix this by stopping off at a store and picking up the items you need. But that's not always possible. Sometimes you can't. So use a checklist. Make sure when you pack in advance, don't wait till the last minute. Gather all your items, put them all together. This way when you pack, there should be nothing left wherever you had all your items stored. If there's something left, then you obviously left it out. My next tip is the frequently repeated phrase, hike your own hike. This means many things, but in this context, this means doing a hike appropriate for your level of activity and experience. I've touched upon this already, but it means that we need to do a hike that is good for the beginner in our group if there's more than one person. I always say if you're hiking as a group, you can only go as fast as your slowest person if you're going to stay together. So I recommend that you go with someone more experienced than you, but make sure they really are experienced. Just because they've gone out in the woods, hunting or out before, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a good guide for you and they're going to make good choices for you. When we're starting out, we generally don't know what we don't know, and we don't even know the questions we should ask. We're relying on that more experienced person to keep us safe and have a good time. So if they pick a trail that is really challenging or difficult for you, you're not going to know that. You might not ask that question or realize that the trail they're picking is a challenging one. And if you have a bad time out there because this trail is really difficult or challenging or just maybe too hard for you, then we'll probably never know that because you probably won't say anything, but you probably won't want to go again. Or that person may never want to go hiking again. And that's a sad thing because we've lost the opportunity to be a good spokesperson for camping, backpacking, and hiking, and to bring another person into that activity that maybe could have had a great time on a different trip. So let's think of who's going, what their abilities are, and what would be a good trip for them. The purpose may be always to get great views and everything, but sometimes that's not the purpose. The purpose is to get the person out there and have a good experience. And you know what I found a lot with, especially with the kids or going with people, sometimes the trip that you think is the worst, they have a great time and think is the best. Almost all the trips that are memorable to me when I was out camping as a Boy Scout or hiking or camping with boys as a leader in Scouts were the ones where the weather was usually terrible and something failed or didn't go good as planned. Like the food didn't go well or the stove failed and we had to come up with another plan B on the spot, so to say. But those are the ones that the kids even talk about the most. And you're thinking it was a big mistake and it went bad. And those are the ones that they generally talk about the most, about what a great time it was. So it's not about the view sometimes. It's about the people, I think, and having fun and having the experience and getting out there. So when I say hike your own hike, it means hike what's good for you. If you're going to be a guide for someone that's less experienced, don't plan a hike for you, plan a hike for them. Realize that this may have to be their hike. You may need to plan a trip for the person with the least experience in your group. And that's okay. Just realize that and put yourself aside and think of it as a great trip for this person so that maybe they'll want to go again. And if they do, you now have a hiking partner that can go on the other trips and will progress, and then eventually you'll get to do the other trips you're planning anyway. So that's what I mean in this case when I say hike your own hike. If you're the new person, you have to realize and maybe speak up when something is not going to be conducive for you to do because it's too much too soon. So we just have to realize that hiking sometimes is hard and is physically demanding. So we need to try and limit that by carrying less equipment, making the trail suitable for our activity of what we're doing, and making sure our gear is as best as we can do. We may not be able to make the mountain less hard to go up. We may not be able to pack way less with the equipment that it has in it, but we certainly can plan better and maybe make it a little lighter and a little easier by picking a trail that's good and making sure we don't overpack. And my last tip is something that I still have trouble with today and I'm doing, and that's taking time out to see the sights, smell the roses, so to say. I still have trouble with this. While I'm hiking, I'm in like go mode, and that's okay. Like I said, hike your own hike, but realize that when you're with someone else, if they want to go see an overlook with a view, you may have to say, okay, let's go see the overlook with a view. It's not my trip, it's our trip, or sometimes their trip. So just realize that, and let's face it, who among us really couldn't afford to take the time out to look at a beautiful view or a mountain overlook or a waterfall? That's one of the reasons we're out there, to enjoy God's good creation. And honestly, I've never regretted going to take those side trips. My problem is getting me to take the side trip in the first place. It's like, I don't know, usually going to work or something. I never maybe want to enthusiastically go to work, but once I start and I get moving and I get there, it's usually not as bad as I thought it would be, or I don't feel as bad once I'm there. So that's my last tip. You know, it's easy to say, but hard to do. I still struggle with it all the time. And not going to see these sites doesn't lessen my experience in terms of I enjoy myself, but it does mean I get to see less unique sites. Well, those are my tips for hikers, whether they're new or planning a trip with a new hiker. Just something to keep in mind. There's a lot more, obviously. I'm sure we could easily think of some more. And I don't want to come up with the phrase of mistakes or errors, because that's kind of negative to me. They're just things to be aware of. So to me, they're tips or learning moments or whatever you want to think of that we need to take into consideration. Most people that have been hiking for a while do a lot of these things, especially when it comes to their gear and planning, just from gaining experience. But like I said, when you're first starting out, you don't know that you should be doing all those things. You don't think about it. Can you get by without doing some of these things? Yes, of course you can. But for the average hiker, your trip will be that much easier and more enjoyable if you do some of these things. There's always going to be people that can go out there and survive and do something with little to no planning. But for most hikers, doing no planning or overpacking or leaving stuff home is going to lessen the experience and make it harder for them to want to look forward to going out and repeating that experience again. What are some of the things you struggle with learning to reduce your weight or plan better, or some of the mistakes or some of the things that you notice, some tips maybe that you have for new hikers that they can use to ease the burden of going out there for the first time or two? Thank you so much as always for taking time out of your day. Appreciate you watching. If you feel so inclined, please leave a comment below. Subscribe if you like what I'm doing and you'd like to see videos in the future. Or if not, just come back and watch again. As always, thank you for taking time out of your day. Till we meet again. I've seen a lot of hikers, and myself included, that have gone out hiking, breast pepper